They are rolling in. Hi, everyone. Welcome. We'll wait for everyone to roll in. I see the numbers starting to go up. Thank you, everyone, for being here.
All right, maybe let's give it one more minute and then we can get rolling.
Feel free to put in the chat where you're coming from. If you're from California, where in California, if you're from out of state, introduce yourself. We'd love to get to know who's here.
All right, well, we've got a good number of people, so let's get started. Thank you everyone for joining us. We really appreciate it. This event is brought to you by the California YangGang and Humanity Forward. So almost a year ago, Andrew dropped out of the race. It doesn't seem like it's been that long, but it really has. But the movement didn't stop there. You know, the YangGang's been hard at work. Andrew created Humanity Forward, and we've all been trying to, you know, really make his vision a reality. And supporting down ballot candidates is a really big part of making that happen. So we were really lucky in California to have a really wonderful group of candidates to support, and a few of them are on this call right now. We're so grateful for their time. So let's get right into it. First, we're gonna have the speakers introduce themselves, and then we're gonna delve into their experiences and reflections on the 2020 campaign. And at the end, we're gonna have a couple questions. So if you see the Q&A box at the bottom of Zoom, you can submit your questions there, and Ryan and Dree from the California YangGang are gonna compile a few of those and present them at the very end. So without further ado, let's start introductions. Let's go to Liam first.
Okay, hi. Welcome to everyone, and thank you so much both for coming out for this and for inviting me to speak here this evening. I know this has been a rough year for a lot of people, and we're all probably zoomed out anyway by the end of it. So I'm going to try and keep both my introduction and the comments as brief as I can and keep within the time limits. You guys know that we can tend to ramble, both politicians and academics, and I'm both. So my name is Liam O'Mara, and I'm a college history professor, and I'm also a working class kid. I'm running in the 42nd Congressional District in Southwest Riverside County. And in this past election, I was honored to be endorsed by, among many others, Andrew Yang and Humanity Forward, and had the support of the California YangGang crew, and I'm really proud of what we accomplished together. Mine is a really tough district. It's heavily Republican. It's an R+9 on the Cook scale, and no Dem had ever come close. I am happy to say that while the result is not what we wanted this first time out, we smashed through every record. Our final vote total is larger than the incumbent has received in any of his own elections in 30 years of doing this. And we took in 53,000 more votes than any Democrat had ever done. I mean, more than half again as much as anybody had ever done for this district. It's really only Trump being on the ballot in a conservative area that saved the incumbent this time around. I think that the economic focus of our campaign and the constant discussion of kitchen table issues had a lot to do with that. It certainly helps to explain why our largest voting bloc were 18 to 24-year-olds, and why we were able to pick up so many self-identified conservative independents despite running on a very clearly progressive platform. And I'll have more to say on that when we come back around to this. But for now, I just want to thank YangGang for their support and their enthusiasm, and let y'all know that we're back for more and already running for 2022.
Thank you, Liam. Love to hear it. I know when phone banking for your campaign, people seemed really excited and fired up. So there's definitely a path there, and we're really excited to see what happens in the next election. All right, we're going to move to Alex Lee.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alex Lee. I am the California State Assembly member for District 25. I won my election, last month, which seems like ages ago. I was a first-time candidate, first time ever running for anything, and I won in Assembly District 25, which is in the Bay Area. I am also 25 years old, so that makes me the youngest state legislator in a really long time. and also the first openly bisexual state legislator and the youngest Asian American state legislator ever. I was very luckily endorsed by Andrew Yang, and he's been a great friend to me throughout this whole process. And yeah, looking to fighting for more progressive values in the California state capitol.
Thank you so much, Alex. We're really excited to see what you do. And now, David Kim.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. And congratulations, Alex. Yes, congratulations. I was really excited, as probably everyone else. So my name is David Kim. I recently ran for, hi everyone, I recently ran for US Congress in CA 34 down here in Los Angeles. I ran because our leadership needs to do better. We have a lot of people experiencing homelessness, a lot of people not being able to pay just basic bills, swallowed up in financial debt. And so that's why I ran, and that's why we did it together, and we had the biggest voter turnout and challenger results. And I think since the 70s, we won a total 47% of the vote. 96,554 people turned out. We lost by 12,000, so it was a very razor thin margin. But we did great. We did amazing, and I'm so glad to be here to share about it. Thankfully to all of you who had helped out and phone banked and text banked. Super, super grateful. I'm excited to be here and talk about whatever we need to. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. Yeah, it was a very competitive race. It was very exhilarating for sure. All right, so those are our three candidates tonight, and we're gonna move along to Ericka.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for inviting me onto this. I served as the Organizing and Operations Director for Humanity Forward during the sprint up to the election. What a crazy, wild ride it was. Lots needed to happen. You know, as you know, Humanity Forward was throwing out endorsements left and right for this run up, and we had a lot going on being a startup organization. Just building out our volunteer network and everything else was all happening simultaneously. So it was an exciting ride. So happy to see so many familiar names here tonight. People that were instrumental in helping all of these candidates who are on this call and many of our other candidates. I am just so pleased with what we were able to accomplish in such a short amount of time. I think we made a huge impact in this country around universal basic income with each and every one of you that are here and their endorsed candidates. And it was, for me personally, it was very exciting to be a part of watching the vision that we all are signed on here for coming into fruition. It's just very personally gratifying. I hope many of you feel the same way. It's just exciting to see what we've accomplished in such a short amount of time. So with that, thank you for inviting me to be here tonight.
Absolutely, thank you so much. And I feel like HF was formed so quickly after Andrew Yang suspended and then immediately went into candidate support mode. It was like building the airplane while you're flying it times 10. So really, really proud of everything we all accomplished together. All right, and then we're gonna kick it to Tom.
Hey everybody, my name's Tom. I'm a longtime social entrepreneur, former Venture for America fellow, grassroots director for the Yang 2020 campaign in South Carolina. And I had the opportunity to lead the candidate support efforts for Humanity Forward during this sprint. It was an absolute joy. The many candidates and Jess and Ericka have already covered just how much of an impact we were able to make, and seeing the fact that we moved the needle. We were winning in so many different ways, not only by getting some candidates into office, but also by shifting the Overton window and bringing some of these policies into the public discourse. And more importantly, we activated people that were disaffected voters, unengaged volunteers, and we found ways to empower them to jump in and take action. That is phenomenal. It's the reason why I'm so grateful to have that opportunity to share some of the lessons I've learned along the way, and to talk about some of the opportunities that we have coming up. So I'm glad to be here, and thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you for being here. I'm really excited to get your perspective on all of this, Tom. All right, so we are going to go into some deeper dives here. So I'm going to pose a couple of questions. You can take inspiration from these questions. You can go off script. These are just to get you started. So what surprised you most about running? What do you wish you know before you ran? And what were your key takeaways from your run? And for the HF folks, you can interpret that however you like. We are going to go to Alex Lee first.
Yeah, what surprised me? I guess in a not surprising way, how much money is involved in races. So the folks who also ran in Congress, we have similar numbers of districts. State Assembly district is 500,000 people in it. And so there's a lot of money being poured into my race. Even the primary, though, we had very little money and it was all grassroots. So even though we were against incredible odds being outspent 15-1, we only spent like $32,000, and just a really strong grassroots presence was able to overcome that. So I guess that surprised me in the way that word of mouth is so strong. So really the work you do on the ground and just really relationship building is so vital, especially amongst the communities and just talking to folks. Because I even had folks just posting on like Nextdoor, well, Nextdoor actually in a positive way, luckily, and posting just in Facebook groups and stuff, because there are a lot of those in my communities, just small groups. And I think the word got around organically that someone young, bright, and who cared, honestly, was running. And I think that helped out a lot. So that was something I think pleasantly surprising, that I was able to overcome money.
All right, what do you wish you knew before you ran, if anything?
Beforehand, I mean, I think just knowing that, a lot of times, a lot of people in races will tell you, you got to get this person's endorsement, this group's endorsement, do all that, which, to be fair, is sometimes important, but I think it's an overestimated amount, because ultimately those groups, they might be able to give you some favors or give you some money, but they aren't the people that are going to vote for you. So just having that reminder early on to people is always super helpful.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, Liam, same questions to you.
Wow, and here I was thinking I was going to try and keep things short, but I know I'm going to go over that. I do tend to talk too much, so mad respect, Alex, for the concision. I'm never any good at that.
I apologize. I'm just a very curt person.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I tend to ramble. If there weren't clocks up in the classrooms, people would never get out. Okay, so I never expected to be leading a political campaign, much less being a candidate myself. I mean, after all, I'm a long-haired former truck driver and fry cook with a long-established habit of saying exactly what's on my mind. So one thing that really surprised me about getting into politics was just how welcoming people could be, especially to such an unconventional candidate. I mean, heck, I was unanimously endorsed by the California Democratic Party, and I still had a beard down to my navel last year when I did that. So yeah, that surprised me, honestly. I think we also flattened a lot of the myths sold by the consultants who are going to tell you that voters don't want to hear hard truths. They don't want to face nuances. They don't have the patience for policy discussions. I mean, it's true, you got to be mindful of what you raise and where, but I found eager audiences, both live and virtually, for discussion of the real issues facing this country. And we used to look to our politicians as thought leaders, as people who would challenge us and tell us to reach for the stars. And I think somewhere along the way, we lost that. And they're replaced by people who just, told us to lower our expectations and pander to our worst fears and instincts rather than challenging us to be better. So I don't know, I guess somehow a professional historian and philosophy nerd managed to connect with people all over the country by, trying to cut out some of the BS and really talk about these things. And I think that tells me a lot about how we can get our politics back to being people focused again. I think that's an important takeaway from this. And I think we also challenged a lot of the orthodoxies about running in red and purple districts, where they're always telling you, you have to run conservative, you have to adopt Republican messaging. And no, we didn't. I mean, I often would frame things carefully, but we ran on very solidly progressive and left ideas, and we picked up a lot of Republican voters along the way here. I wish that I had, I came into this having done my homework on the district and its history, but I didn't have any real practical political experience. I hadn't worked on campaigns before. And I, again, never really thought that this would be where I would be. So I wish I'd gotten involved sooner, joined the Democratic Club, spent time getting to know more people in the county before I dived in. I was actually very thankful that I was embraced as quickly as I was, because I'm still pretty clueless about a lot of, Robert's Rules of Order still confuses me at times. And, there's still a lot of things about the county party and state party structure that are pretty opaque to me. But I wish I'd known a lot more about that. And, also how to attract volunteers and staff and really work well in that kind of environment. Because again, not having practical political experience, we had to learn a lot as we went along. And I have mad respect for the people who got involved early and had to put up with me being completely clueless about how to do this. So yeah, those early staffers, I mean, wow. But it would also have been nice to know in advance just how weird 2020 would get, because the pandemic brought a lot of serious complications. I mean, not least by shrinking our fundraising opportunities and stopping us from doing rallies and knocking doors. But it did bring some opportunities as well. And I am thankful that we had such a young and technologically nimble campaign team that were able to think fast on their feet and come up with innovative strategies that could help us reach the voters we needed. So that is really important to me. I guess I'll just wind down here just saying again, as far as what my biggest takeaway was, if you're going to run red, if you're going to run in a red district, run from the left, not from the right. I think that we need to work harder to build the small donor networks to support a lot of those races, because that infrastructure is still kind of in its infancy, and things do cost money in campaigns. But when people hear our message, they get excited. And if we can reach enough voters, we can absolutely win in these districts here. So I want to keep experimenting and hoping to reach people. And another thing that really challenged me too, that surprised me in terms of a takeaway, is that youth voters actually showed up. They're always telling us, don't count on them, don't count on them. That's Bernie's mistake. He counted on the young. Well, they were our single largest voting bloc. So thank you. If you give them a reason to care, they'll show up. So that also is another key takeaway for me.
I love it. Thank you so much, Liam. I really like what you're saying about not falling into the trap of, moderating your views because of the district. I think when people hear your message and the authenticity behind it, that's really persuasive to them as well. So point well taken. All right, we are going to move to David Kim now. So what surprised you most about running? What do you wish you knew before you ran? And what were your key takeaways?
Yeah, I think what surprised me the most are two elements, and they're both related. The first is I remember first filing. It was around July 2019. It was myself, my friend Cindy, and then another person, and then by the end of primary cycle, it was the four or five of us, and how small we were as a team. And then from March through November, that team ended up becoming so big. We ended up having over 200 people on Slack. We had people phone banking, text banking. Just how I guess I was just surprised at how big and fast a people-led movement looked like and turned out to be. And so I'm super thankful in that aspect. I mean, locally, LA showed up, grassroots solidarity. We had progressive voter guides listing our campaign, recommending or endorsing straight across, just every single voter guide. And it was just so powerful to see people really chiming in, whether that be with sharing with social media, getting the word out, telling their family and friends. And so I was really amazed and surprised by that, and super thankful. And it really gave me a lot of just confidence in the sense that we're just almost there, like here locally as well. We got Nithya into LA City Council, LA's, we're still moving forward. And another thing that I was surprised about was what Alex had mentioned was, wow, the money, oh my gosh. I think for us, we had exactly just budgeted for what we thought was the bare bones minimum that we should be doing as a campaign. And so we had sent out to 120,000 mailers, did the yard signs, but then never expected the opponent to send out 6 mailers every day in a row, different mailers with quotes and pictures leading people to think that he was endorsed by Senator Sanders or Representative Ocasio-Cortez. And so we weren't able to really engage with that at all because we didn't have the money to do ads. We didn't have the money to do mailers. And so I remember even people coming up to me and saying, "Hey, David, we're so excited to vote for you again, but we saw that Senator Sanders endorsed Representative Gomez, so we don't know what to do." And it's like, no, he did it. And like explaining that. And so I think for us, like we underestimated the power of money, of being able to have that fundraising and to do all of those mailers and to change the conversation suddenly in the last 3 weeks of the campaign. What you wish you knew before. So yeah, so I guess I knew that was that serious. I mean, I had known about it, but I didn't know it was that serious. And what you wish you knew before that, just every second counted. I think for us, I don't regret big time on anything, but just looking back hindsight, you always kind of notice some areas where, oh, we could have done this. Okay, noted, but it already happened. And so I think with that, we did spend more time than we could have in terms of structuring things up from March through June. And that took us a lot of time to set that up. So it would have been great if somebody were to say, "Hey, David," because I was a first-time candidate, just like everyone else, but it would have been great of being a 5-person team to now suddenly being a 30, 40-person team. I didn't know how to deal with that. And so it was, I think that was also reflective. I learned a lot in terms of leadership, really finding my voice and what that looked like later on too. And then when California YangGang entered, oh my gosh, our campaign went another level. Just so I've learned a lot, and I'm very humbled to even share about my experiences and what I had. Key takeaways from my run is, yeah, I think that it definitely does take time to find your voice, what you really stand for individually, or it could be fast. But I think that's also the same collectively as a group, as a campaign, as a community. And so, and never to underestimate that our voice is there for us to use it, that it's so powerful. And I think for us, like, I think our community just showing up showed how much they wanted to be voiced for and to be spoken on behalf of. And so, so yeah, so I think some of the other stuff I'd love to share, but yeah, I realized that our community just needs more interaction with each other, connectivity with ourselves, with each other. And I think we're on some good days ahead of us if we continue in that route.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. You know, being lucky enough to be part of your campaign, it also surprised me how contentious things got between you and the incumbent. And I feel like maybe I was a little naive as well going into it, despite, you know, being pretty passionate about politics. So it was definitely a lesson learned for me. But I think it also shows that the grassroots efforts and the progressive message is strong, and that sort of the mainstream Democratic Party sees it as a threat and they're starting to take it seriously. And I think that means, you know, we're really going to have a seat at the table. So, you know, seeing the silver lining, I suppose. All right, well, thank you so much to our candidates. That was really illuminating. Let's kick it to Ericka first to discuss her perspective.
Yeah, it's so interesting hearing all of the candidates talk about their needs. One of the things that comes to mind for going forward would be great to have is candidate education, like some form of being able to help, like Humanity Forward, being able to help the candidates understand what they're getting into a little deeper, maybe even start a panel of people that have run before to be mentors for new candidates. Like things like that would be really helpful, I think. What surprised me was like how, you know, the pandemic forced us into a virtual campaign space, and just how successfully we adapted to that. Like, it really surprised me because I was like freaking out in my head, like, how are we gonna like get people to vote in this environment? Like how to, you know, because it's such a connecting, you know, organizing is all about connecting and relating. So I was really surprised at how well we adapted this virtual world that we're living in to what we had to accomplish. I also am just surprised at how wonderful, I mean, this isn't really a surprise. It's more like how proud I felt about our candidates. Like, I just was like so excited, like the whole idea of having a cash caucus, or like just having, you know, all of these UBI supporters running for Congress and changing the conversation. I was just so pleased by how successful that was. In terms of, you know, building the plane while flying it, that was not a surprise that we were doing that, because that's how the entire Yang campaign was in the first place. So why not, you know, build out a whole candidate endorsement program the same way? But yeah, look, of course, I wish we had more of our tech and processes and everything in place beforehand, but we learned a lot during getting started, you know, and what will be helpful next time around. So the biggest thing that I would say that I wish I knew before all of this started was how to help the local spaces for each candidate to be more empowered to help with the candidates. Like, I really feel like we missed the boat on that. As in some ways, we were trying to bring it from a national space, because that's where we are as Humanity Forward, to a local space. And I really wish we started more in a local space mindset going into the whole endorsement process. In recruiting volunteers and, you know, just plugging them in locally. I think it's more gratifying for the volunteer to be in that space that way. And I also thought it was, I mean, you know, people phone banking from New York into California is just, it's just a difficult situation. So I think the more that we could have, if I had known to promote that way, would have been, I think it would have had more impact for the candidates as well as the interaction for the volunteer. Yeah, I think that's pretty much what were my key takeaways. Yeah, that was that. Yeah, I think I'm pretty much, I'm ready to pass it on. Tom has plenty more to say because he was really on the ground with all of it. You know, I was in a more of a higher top level perspective, and Tom was in the nitty gritty. So I'm even looking forward to hearing what Tom has to say about it.
All right, Tom, well, let's hear it.
Well, what I'll start with is the key takeaways that I always come back to is the importance of starting as early as possible. You may see me in a little bit of a battle with the screen behind me, but I wanted to show this photo because this is the earliest stage empty warehouse that we had back during the Yang 2020 campaign in South Carolina. And we had purchased things completely on our own. There was no budget for it. We were dealing with mold and all kinds of crazy things. And by putting in the investment early, we saw how quickly things were able to grow. We're going into the winter solstice tomorrow. It is the longest night, and it's also the reminder that things are going to get better. And every time you push, you find that you're able to push a little bit farther than you were the day before. And that's the core takeaway that I definitely got from this experience. In terms of what surprised me along the way, I was very, very pleasantly surprised by how quickly so many local groups were able to reorganize, shift priorities, focus in, and support candidates. The California YangGang is a perfect example of this. The way that you coalesced around some of the candidates was truly phenomenal and inspiring, and it showed that when people are engaged locally, when they have that connection, when the candidate is talking about things in their own backyard, there's a level of inspiration that volunteers feel that you wouldn't get otherwise. That New York to California effect that Ericka mentioned earlier, you lose something along the way. And it's not just the engagement with the voter, it's the lack of passion that a person may have because it's not someone directly tied to where they live. So building up those local groups, providing support from the national level, but never stepping on the toes, just emboldening them to take those steps on the ground is really the best way forward. And what gives me the most hope is that we're continuing to build out those types of structures. All of these local groups across the states, they are continuing to grow, they're continuing to get support, and that puts us in a very positive position for 2022. Another thing that really caught me off guard in an exciting way was just how much the process of running is less about the actual race, and it's more about riding the wave of the current events. So we've had people talk about the pandemic, the fact that there was record unemployment, the fact that there was a massive civil unrest that needed to happen. All of these things that took place in the public discourse were things that changed how races were run. And being able to work on the fly and have that comfortability, being flexible, that changed everything. And being able to talk to candidates, to talk to volunteers, to talk to staffers, and remind them that no one can possibly have a game plan for 2020 or just life in general. You can find a way to work through it, and remember that it's not about finding the good or the bad in the day. It's trying to remember, what did we learn, how did we grow, and how did we improve? And those lessons really guide us. One final piece I do want to add in terms of logistics. Wow, working virtually is difficult. The amount of time that we had to spend on the back end of Zoom, or working on the back end of auto dialers versus NGP versus all of the different tools that, I mean, NGP isn't even used in California, so it shows the nuance there. There's a lot of technical structure that goes into the back end of things. And the lessons that we learned, the templates that we built, the pathways and processes that are now in place mean that the foundation is set for some really exciting races in the future. And I've got nothing but hope and optimism for what that's going to look like.
Love it. Thank you so much, Tom and Ericka. Very educational and inspirational. And Tom, I love your family photos right behind you. Alex, the pandemic was mentioned after you were able to speak. So I wanted to loop back really quickly and ask you, how did the pandemic affect your campaign? Do you feel like you sort of gained an advantage as someone young and presumably more tech savvy, or did it sort of hinder your efforts?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's such a reality we all live in now that I even forgot it was a different thing that we didn't have. But no, it's I agree with what everyone is saying. You know, it's so different to be campaigning in the coronavirus age. I really do think down ballot everyone, it really did hurt progressives, because the strongest way we always have is face-to-face and really getting to know folks. And as many Zoom events and phone calls and texts we do, it doesn't make up for that. You know, there's no compensating for that, unfortunately. But we did what we could, right? We did a very strong digital campaign. We had a very good phone and texting outreach program. But I always felt I was missing that's touch, right? Because in the primary for us, we knocked on 30,000 doors and went to every small event that was possible. So to go from that to nothing in literally a week was quite devastating in a lot of ways. So definitely having a tech savvy approach is good. But you get to build upon all those relationships you had in the primary. So there are folks I was texting and checking in on and calling that we already have relationships with in voters in district, and luckily that leverage into other things. And, you know, frankly, I think especially, and this might be true in the future for things that happen, is that I think campaigns that adapt well to the circumstances we find ourselves in, whether it be national awakening to police brutality and racism that exists in this country, or whether it be the coronavirus and the pandemic and all the economic effects, if we can pivot our organizations to be also aid for our community, it also makes it stronger because we are also demonstrating that leadership. And that's what the community was kind of necessary. And that's what we kind of did a lot of in the campaign. We shifted a lot of those resources. And honestly, we kind of only started going back into real campaign mode till like the latter half. It's just the need was so immense. And I think in the end, you know, the reward was in itself, the work of doing that. And so people knew us from the work we did. And in fact, I had a lot more people know who I was because I took a very strong stance on police brutality, on economic measures, And frankly, I see some questions about UBI. Look, UBI is so much easier to talk about when, the economy just wiped out from a coronavirus standpoint, where I would have libertarians and people who traditionally are very conservative say, like, where is my government stimulus check? People would just have completely changed their attitude because the world has changed. And I think it actually is much, much easier to talk about these issues where there was more reticence in the past. And I think people are open to the idea, but there's just more reluctance and you need more convincing. Now it's like, well, that seems common sense almost. So it's a completely different landscape that thankfully works in favor of a lot of policy, but politically, campaigning wise is a challenge for sure.
Absolutely. Very salient points all around. All right, so we're going to move on to our next segment. And the questions for inspiration are, what advice would you give to future candidates or campaign staff? How could YangGang related organizations and volunteers, both nationally and in district, help you in the future or have better supported you in this past race? And what does the future look like for you? And we're going to go to David Kim first for this one.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah. The first, what advice would you give to future candidates? Yes. Definitely do as much research as you need to for your areas, for the positions that are there before you decide to run. No need to pre-announce anything unless you're for sure running. If you need to talk to people, please do. I think once you do your research, whatever those elements are, I think the key thing is time is so important. Just be very resourceful and useful with your time. Like what Alex shared, we also spent a lot of time just on community efforts from March through June as well. So now thinking about it when he was sharing, I just thought, oh yeah, we were doing that. So it wasn't a loss or anything. But I also just felt like if we had just one more month, we could have had that couple of percentages. And so with that, and then also just with money, so I think it's good to perhaps gamify things, whether that be with when you're launching your campaign, whether it be with volunteer signups or whether it be with a fundraising goal, kind of building that momentum for your supporter base so that they could also look forward to something. What I really learned a lot from our later directors that came in were those elements of building and setting up these momentum markers so that our supporters base could also see that as well. And so that's what I learned a lot from Jess and other people here too. And really, I think if you see key people that are stepping in and really showing you that, hey, they really care, then let them have that, empower them, designate that role to them. Because I found that once you did that, things ended up being a lot much better, smoother, powerful, more efficient, effective. So do that. There's no need to follow a certain hierarchical structure. I think that's where that's what we sort of had issues with March through June in a way. But once we were able to, hey, can you please be in charge of this since it looks like you're amazing at it? Once we started doing that, that's where our campaign really started taking off. And so just looking back, when a person started a role and then when the campaign finished, oh my gosh, each person was so powerful, 1,000, 10,000%, much more than what I had seen and what they had seen probably as well. So that's advice that I would give. How could YG related, YangGang related orgs and volunteers have better supported? I am forever grateful to California YangGang because I think if it weren't for California YangGang, I don't think we would have mobilized the YangGang Los Angeles local base as much as it was mobilized as well. I know that for phone banking and text banking, a majority was YangGang. I know that for ground game and field work, it was split between the local progressive and YangGang. But what I feel that really showed for the local progressive base also was in FaceTime and interaction with YangGang and realizing, oh, okay, we're all fighting for the same needs. And I really felt that that's what our campaign helped do as well. Could have better supported. I don't know. I guess we could have had, I don't know. One thing that I thought was, oh my gosh, our phone banking program was so solid and strong. Why didn't we meet Jess sooner? So that was that question there. So that's all. What does future look like for you? I am meeting Representative Gomez on January 14th. So we have a meeting and he's open to hearing just what issues we saw were very important to the constituents, what they really care about and how to really bridge that gap. Because I mean, if some leaders are willing to listen, then yeah, have that meeting, have a heart to heart. And so I'll be ready with my points on what to share, but really coming from a very friendly tone with that and not anything hostile, because it's all really for the community that we're fighting. So there are some battles and that you need to choose and fight. So doing that, we haven't rolled out a formal announcement yet. I'm running for ADEM's local, so for Assembly District 53, the ADEM slate. I am on the people slate, and so we have amazing grassroots leaders that are on our slate. I wish I could brag about them, but I can't yet. So look out for that, because we can really push for change within our local party as well. I had to be convinced for about a week and a half to finally say yes, because I was to this point of don't even say the D party, but I decided, you know what, let's give it a shot, let's do it. So I decided to run for ADEMS, and then I am continuing my job as an immigration litigation attorney. That's what I do every day. But then we are also starting a radio show, so it's called The People with David and Fam. I will let you guys know what radio station that is, but it's to bridge our community together to make it more interconnected. I really felt that it was great to see our community show up with all of the progressive voter guides, but what if we had that consistently throughout? How much more powerful could we be if we had a platform to be able to amplify our voices within each community, communities with each other, events that are going on, really items that affect us, and so it's called The People with David and Fam. Look out for that. It'll probably be launching February, March. So look out for that. And I'll stay connected with a lot of you guys. Thank you.
Wow, lots of really exciting stuff coming down the pike for you. That's wonderful. And now we are going to turn to Liam O'Mara. Same questions to you.
Okay, let's see. I gotta say, in some ways, politics really is a rich man's game. Ever since like 1896, when corporations and the rich first stepped up to dump vast sums into an election, things have gotten worse and worse. And it now costs so much money even to run for city councils that there are Democratic majority cities with all Republican city councils, because they're the ones can suck up the corporate cash, So one thing I would suggest to anyone considering a run is start raising money as soon as you possibly can and never, ever stop. Work those phones till your ears bleed and your fingers fall off. That has to be the hardest lesson for me personally. I'm one of those people who just, I can't ask anybody for help. So begging for money for this was difficult, but it is important, and I wish I'd gotten a much earlier start with that. So, but we have seen that people can run very credible campaigns on small donors, so absolutely do it. To David's much earlier point about campaign sizes and growth and all that, I got to say a few things about just the staff, the volunteers, how all this works. One piece of advice that I give to anybody who wants to volunteer or work on a campaign is the same thing that I would tell people who want to run. Just do it. A lot of people who got involved in our campaign had no previous political experience at all. Many of them were, people who didn't even vote before. Several of our hardest workers were people who were still 17 by the time the election ended. So they couldn't even vote, and they put in time every single week. Mad respect for the amount of time that people were willing to put in for something that they believed in. And I think that, in going from, we started off, there was, three of us, 3 or 4, just like with David's, but by the end, there were 30 people on the core team, dozens and dozens of volunteers and interns. It got huge, and there's a lot of growing to do there. But I think that letting people take on the challenges that they want to do and learn and grow in those responsibilities is important. I'm a firm believer in giving people the opportunities that they want and letting them try to do it. And by the time we got to the end, we have a lot of really seasoned political operatives for the next generation out here. I think that in terms of both YangGang related organizations, as well as just organizations just in general, one thing that could help candidates like us all across the country is better shared infrastructure and tools. we really struggled to pay for some of the very expensive software used for donor contacts and voter data and to run the phone banks and text banks. And so much of the foundations for that is actually freely available. It's just that the companies that put together the front ends for it can charge so much money for that. If we could somehow put together like good progressive PAC money that could fund that stuff, produce those tools, and then share them out, it could save campaigns a lot of money and allow them to spend that money where it matters, reaching the voters. And it reminds me, like also Ericka's comment earlier about she mentioned a past candidate advisory committee. I'm actually working on something like that right now with a handful of other former candidates. We want to try and put together a way to share things that we learned along the way and help people so that someone who wants to come into this, like I was, completely green, has someone to turn to. So I think that that'd be one place where YangGang could really help out going forward, and we could use some of this downtime to start building up those tools. I do think that the YangGang folks, I mean, are incredibly passionate and helpful, and I feel blessed to be associated with all of you. And I would love it if we could see if we could find ways to provide just better institutional support, infrastructural support, and, you know, honestly, better financial support, like sharing lists and helping to raise money and whatnot. Because, I mean, that just thinking of 2020, the House lost a bunch of seats. We lost what, like 9 seats, but every one of them was a conservative blue dog. Meanwhile, a bunch of avowed progressives running in red districts outperformed the candidates that the DCCC dumped millions of dollars into, which means that dollar for dollar, we did a hell of a lot better. And if we could get even a fraction of that money, we could turn this whole country around and flip seats all across the country. So trying to find ways to improve that matters a lot to me. Okay, so what does the future look like? David mentioned being involved as an ADEM, and great to see that because I was the top Democratic vote earner. I'm an ex officio in our county party and a delegate to the state party, so I'm going to stay heavily involved in that and help out other candidates. And yeah, we're running again, so we're already working on that. For me, I'm actually really hopeful for the future. I mean, despite, again, this district's long history as a Republican bastion, redistricting is going to help us a lot. And in the last 10 years, the population of the Inland Empire has doubled. And a lot of that population are people moving out of LA. A lot of them are younger. And the youth, again, really turned out for us. We're likely to gain an entire congressional seat and a couple of assembly seats. So things are really going to change, and better borders are really going to help Democrats in this area. So I'm hopeful that with Trump off of the ballot in 22, it's going to help a lot of those Democrats running in this area. And if we can draw those youth voters back out again, we win. And that, to me, I guess, is one of the most encouraging things about this whole year, was just seeing that youth energy. That gives me so much hope for the future of this country, because it's so easy to get pessimistic and sad about this. I mean, one of the things I study professionally is fascism. So a lot of the things that we've seen in this country and around the world have been frankly terrifying. But a lot of the younger voters, they know this economy has left them behind, and they're pissed, and they're willing to do something about it. And just seeing the young people turning up to help out and to vote, to do everything there, it matters so much to me. And I think that if we can, really give people a sense of hope, and not like the false hope of slogans, but a real hope based on solid policy proposals, I think that can turn this whole country around. I mean, we had record turnout in 2020 because of the whole Trump issue here, but 80 million eligible voters still didn't vote. We have to give people a reason to care, and people that they can trust. And that's one thing that, I'm very proud to be associated with YangGang, because I think together we're doing that. And I'm proud to stand with all of you in offering a real alternative. So
thank you so much, Liam. I agree. 2020 was full of teachable moments, in good ways and bad. And in terms of youth volunteers, I know David can attest to this. We had someone named Aiden on the phone making team who was an absolute superstar. And I think he's helping HF now. And he was wonderful. And I want to call his parents and tell them how proud they should be of their son. And I might still do that. All right, so we're going to go to Alex. Same questions. What advice would you give to future candidates or campaign staff? how could YangGang related orgs have better helped you or could help you in the future? And what does the future look like for you?
Yeah, well, I will just say again, everyone made excellent, awesome points again, so I won't belabor those ones. But, you know, it's definitely just the mindset, remember, that we're all in this movement together. Unlike traditional and conventional politics, which are all about one-off shows, one-off stars, right? What we're doing is a movement politic. And what we can do is immensely important in how it impacts across the state and other candidates, how we're successful ripples across the state. So that is really, really important. So, you know, especially where you can get more volunteers or people to donate, especially at the grassroots level, it's so, so important. And whatever engagement, you know, you find yourselves coming into next year is really important. I guess I'll just talk about a little bit about future plans. Since everyone gives such great advice, I don't want to, retread that path. So, you know, ADEMS, for those who don't know, is basically the elected way for you to get into the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party in California essentially is thousands of people, right? In January, if people are running for ADEMS, which is just the name for it, you can do election amongst the Democratic Party locally based on your assembly district. So in mine, it's based on my assembly district. And that's way you can make change in the party. I am luckily helping run a progressive slate here of 14 folks that I'm really hoping are going to make a lot of difference there. And it's not traditional that assembly members support a bunch of activists. It's usually like, you know, picking a bunch of favorites of, oh, hey, you did political favors for me or whatever, and you did all those things. Legislation wise, to really help a lot of folks out, is what we're going to do in California is I authored a bill on my first day to ban corporate special interest money to candidates in California, as well as build public financing election system. So that will hopefully radically be a sea change in elections. I'm also working together with Assemblymember Evan Lowe and Senator Scott Wiener on the UBI bill. Assemblymember Evan Lowe has done a UBI bill in the past, so he's reintroducing it now, and I'm going to co-author it in January, February, whenever we can reconvene. So we're going to be working on those things, and it's really important is that, you know, as someone who is in office, to make sure our ideals are translated to tangible policy, right? Because as more and more people understand the tangible material benefits of these things, our ideas become more and more mainstream. You know, I know there's some connotation of the word, but, you know, they become more commonplace and they're not so crazy or far-fetched, and everyone will start saying, well, I know what UBI is, I know what all these things are already, and I'm so glad that you're doing these things. And because the hard work we're doing will ensure that candidates or folks who are organizing are going to have a such easier time in the future. So just like Liam, I'm going to be on the ballot again in 2 years. It's killer to run every 2 years, but it's like really important to make sure that we have an important accountability and making sure we're actually fulfilling the promises. Because for me, the scary part is, you know, after we won the election, in my mind, that was almost the easy part. The hard part is now making good on all those promises, right? Because everyone on this call, I believe, didn't get into politics just to get this fancy title and get status or something. We want to go in there to make real change, right? And we know the odds we're up against. So it's so important to be constantly organizing, whether it be on issues, on bills, or especially on the ground about so many issues. There are so many things literally happening right now in the world that need our attention. So any way you can help is always going to be super important and helpful.
Thank you so much, Alex. I actually didn't know you were going to co-author the Cal UBI bill, but it makes a lot of sense, and we're so happy to see that. California YangGang actually has a meeting with Evan Lowe's office on Monday to talk about how we can help. So would love to continue those conversations. So let's go over to Tom for sort of the HF perspective.
Yeah, I think a lot of the points that were already hit are very phenomenal. It shows the power of engagement and the power of people stepping up. Some of the specifics that I think really give us the ability to better support candidates in the future are, number one, start with yes. If you are a volunteer leader, if there is a new volunteer that's coming in, they are excited, they are energetic, they have no idea what to do, start with yes. Start with empowering them to jump in, take that action, and feel comfortable doing so. That they took that moment, they took that leap of faith. Let's trust them and let's show that faith as well. And if you're a new volunteer joining in, you should start with yes as well. Don't feel like you have to constantly reach back out for permission to advocate for someone that's taking some positive change. They're pushing for something better. You believe in them. You're ready to go out there and make that difference, make that impact. Start with yes and go there. The second thing that I'd really focus on is emphasizing Liam's point about the technical structures. So as we grow, we'll have the ability to have more software that's available, to have more databases and lists that are properly shared with all the privacy standards in place, but all of the ability for us to connect with people and make their jobs easier. When you're a candidate on the ground, or you're the staff that's on the ground, the most important thing is having the flexibility to ride the wave of what is happening in your own neighborhood, in your own backyard. And having the YangGang and all of these related groups take on some of the heavy lifting, time-intensive work of phone banking or text banking, or doing letter writing or drafting letters to the editor, or doing database management or social media. All of these things take a lot of time, and if it falls on the campaign to do it, then they're not free enough to go do the things that help them connect with voters directly. So let's free up those candidates and give them that ability. The last thing is realizing there's no job that's too small. One of the biggest challenges is feeling the enormity of what we're trying to do. We are trying to shape politics in a completely new way. We are trying to not just create new policies, we are trying to create a new mindset in how we view politics in the first place. That's a big deal. That is a lot of work. And sometimes that enormity makes it seem like taking a little bit of time to clean up an office or phone bank and talk to just one voter at a time, it feels like that might not be worth it. But the truth is that is everything. That is how you win, because you're talking to a voter that then goes out, they make that vote, they talk to their friends and family, and they carry that wave forward. So no job is too small. And every chance that you get to sit back and look, it's those little things that you always look back on and go, wow, I did that. That was fun. It's the same reason why I've given up on the screen back here, but it's the same reason why I showed the office at the beginning, because taking those steps, even if it feels like it's too small, even if it feels like it's way too early and you're not seeing the results from it, those are the biggest ways for the YangGang and all of these affiliated groups to keep making a difference. In terms of future steps and what I've got planned, I'm now the executive director for the Columbia Life Improvement Monetary Boost. It is a new guaranteed income program here in South Carolina that's launched alongside Mayors for a Guaranteed Income. And we're providing 100 fathers and their families a guaranteed income for 2 full years, with the idea of reshaping how our state views this type of work. And the reason why I'm really excited about it is not just the impact that we make locally. It's the fact that doing these types of programs and these types of projects, they give future candidates running in 2022, 2024, or every race in between something to point to. So the next time there's a candidate running in South Carolina, they can look at our program, they can look at the CLIMB program and say, wow, that's incredible. I can see the impact of what you're trying to push for, and that makes all the difference. So we're really excited about that. I'm helping to launch a number of other pilots across the country. New Orleans is a personal favorite of mine. And we just hope that this helps lay another layer of groundwork for future candidates to keep on moving the ball forward.
That is so amazing, Tom. I'm really excited to see what comes from that. I'm sure it'll be great. All right, Ericka.
Truly exciting, everything that everyone has said here. I'm just, I'm going to try to close it out as best I can on this question. Tom, amazing stuff. You just talked, all of you, the things that you're moving on to are incredible, and it's exciting to hear. So my biggest, I guess advice that I could give to, and I'm going to do this from a volunteer perspective because that's who I was working with. We came from a national campaign. This all started because Andrew Yang ran for president and opened us up to new ideas for government. So as big and wonderful as that was and is, there's nothing more powerful than getting involved in your local politics. Like literally nothing is more important than making an impact, as Tom said, in your own backyard. It has more of an impact if you run for city councils and local mayor races and you know, state legislative, those things actually matter more. And if you look back at what other movements did, like the Tea Party, they infiltrated state and local government. And that is exactly what we need to do. We need to take our ideas very intentionally into the local spaces. I can't say that enough. You know, Humanity Forward is here to help with providing tools to do these kinds of things. Like one of the ideas that I'm proposing that Humanity Forward look at doing is a candidate toolkit, campaign in a box, something that gets people off the ground to start, you know, start off running, like a distributed program. You know, that's going to take some time to put together in order for it to be useful to the candidates. But it's such an, you know, the tools can be a barrier to success if you don't know how to use them, if you don't know how to implement them, if you don't know how to get people on them, you know, and using them regularly. It's just it's a burden that I think if we really put our minds to it, we could come up with something to get someone started, like a starter toolkit. Getting more in depth in candidate info is something, a note I wrote down for myself. What I mean by that is I felt like there was a disconnect from the information that Humanity Forward had on each candidate on our website to how much information is actually needed to support the candidates. Like, I feel like we need an in-depth library for what they're running, you know, what's going on in their own districts and being helpful there. And a lot of times people, volunteers were looking for one-pagers, you know, and creating them, and just having a library of those things available from a national perspective would be really helpful if we were to have more national involvement. You know, if somebody from New York wants to help in California, getting that information is key. It's just really important. I do think, like, involving the youth, as you said, Jess, oh my goodness, young volunteers are our future. They are so critical to, you know, ingraining people into educating themselves on civics. I mean, they are so important, and their energy is what keeps the rest of us that may have been around for a while, you know, engaged. So we need that. We definitely need that. So in terms of what the future holds for Humanity Forward, we all know that we're working really, you know, Humanity Forward is on all jets on fire towards getting cash relief to an appropriate level. I don't know if any of you are as disappointed as I am with $600 is just, it's insulting to the American people, in my opinion. So as much as, you know, that's exciting that we actually had some impact around that, it's still not enough. The fight is not even close to being done. We are not anywhere near completion. What's exciting to me, though, I will say, we started out by endorsing candidates that support UBI, right? That's so exciting. And now we're in Congress converting current Congress people to UBI. So not only are we working on bringing people into the to the fold of understanding how this can move our country forward, there's so much low-hanging fruit within Congress because it's not a polarizing issue yet, and we need to take advantage of that. And the work that is going on right now, and all the support that we're getting from all of you in pushing this forward is just fantastic. I mean, did you think a year ago that all of this would be discussed at this point in time? I mean, did anyone honestly think that, you know, and what were we trying to do? We were trying to get Andrew on the final debate stage or something at this point last year. Did we know that we would be here? And thank you, universe, for, I mean, just all the opportunity for us to talk about our message. It's just so important that we don't shy away from saying yes, is what Tom said. You know, taking it, I'm committed to this. You know, I feel very committed to our movement becoming a powerhouse that takes over and actually makes humanity the central focus of this country. And, you know, I could get on a soapbox and talk about it forever. So I'm not going to do that. But like I said earlier, most important thing to take away from me and what we're going to do going forward with our chapter structure and everything else is get it local, get the local spaces super involved, because it'll grow nationally so easily if it's got a solid foundation in each district.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I can't wait to see what Humanity Forward and all these candidates do in the future, because I think that it's only going to get better and brighter from here on out. So thank you so much.
I just wanted to do one more little thing. I just wanted to do a shout out to the California YangGang. You guys were phenomenal through this whole season. I mean, literally phenomenal. You are an exemplary way in which we can all look to for how we can improve on the state levels. It's just amazing how much you supported the candidates and everything else. So I point to you guys a lot to how successful you've been. So thank you. Just even this event. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I really appreciate it. We have so many folks in California YangGang who work really hard, and I'm lucky enough to call them my friends as well, and they're a great team. Well, we have time for a couple questions, so I am going to kick it to Dree, who is also in the California YangGang, and she's going to take it from here.
Sorry, I was muted. Thanks everybody for sharing. I'm going to start with a little combination question. So how did you initially get volunteers as an unknown candidate, and how did you pick your campaign managers? Were they a volunteer also? Because we can just start kind of popcorn, or Liam, if you want to go first.
Sure, they're very different questions. For managers, that was one of the harder ones. My first manager was somebody who had no experience at all and actually has joined the campaign to do scheduling and just ended up taking on more and more and more. Like, well, you want to try and run this thing? Sure, yeah, okay. And we went with it as long as we could. She ended up getting a much better job with the California Democratic Party. So like, mad respect for what she learned in the process. But finding people that will come on to do that aren't going to cost you an arm and a leg is tough. And sometimes it is, especially for these insurgent campaigns, it makes a lot more sense to find people who are going to work for less or even help out in a volunteer basis or divide up tasks, because if you're paying somebody $2 or $3 grand a month, that's a lot that you could be spending on something else. But it is a real challenge too, because you also need people who know what they're doing. So it's a real, there's no good answer to it. Volunteers are an interesting one. For in-person stuff, the thing that helped me the most was actually going to the Democratic clubs and tapping into people there. And a lot of people, once they hear you speaking at the clubs, are like, yeah, sign me up there. But it also gets you more older volunteers. To get a lot of the younger volunteers, I started going and talking to the high schools and the community colleges. I mean, I got invited in by the political clubs, the local high schools, and people were like, yeah, sign me up. I'm like, that helped a lot too. Once we got a much more digital campaign, people all across the country were able to start jumping in too. And that helped a lot.
Nice. So it sounds like you really dug your hands in there. David, how about you?
Yeah. When I decided to run, I didn't want to go into it alone. So I needed at least one other person to go into the running process with me. So I actually asked a friend, a really close friend, somebody that I could just give up everything to, I just asked her, Cindy, who's ever helped on my campaign knows who she is. But I said, hey, Cindy, can you be my campaign manager? I know you've never done this, but, and I've never ran for office, but I think for me, because I did help out on congressional campaigns before, I sort of knew what the process was like. just kind of on a general level, just as how I learned, I kind of, my mom never taught me how to do Korean cooking. I just looked over her shoulder and acquired those. So it kind of that level. And so I just thought, hey, like, I kind of know the basics, like, trust me. And so she said yes. So that's how that happened. The primary cycle, it was basically me, her, my boyfriend who canvassed for me a couple times, and then one or two friends, and that was it. And we won second place out of 5 candidates. General cycle, our volunteers really came in from YangGang initially, and from there we also did a organizer fellow program where we got more engagement from local grassroots communities and orgs. So we had a lot of volunteers from Sunrise Movement LA come in and help, from People's City Council LA, from different groups. And I think for volunteers, yeah, really tap into your local grassroots community base, because you, as somebody running for office, are I mean, it definitely helps to be connected with your community, to co-govern with them, and with that also get their help and support. So that's definitely one way. And obviously California YangGang played a huge role in our campaign. But I would say, yeah, once you have that, I think for us, it was, and once you know who those people are who are putting in their all, and it's very obvious, give them more freedom to do what they're passionate for about doing. And I think that's where it all starts to really fall in place, and it really becomes a people-led movement.
Thanks. Yeah, I think we lost Alex. I'll go on to the next question. So related to volunteers again, did you find any reasonable, affordable organizing platforms or software from which your volunteers can phone, text, do social media banking, etc.?
Not really. We did actually invent a number of tools along the way. A few people in the campaign were software developers themselves and were constantly coming up with their own tools, but we really shouldn't have to spend time doing that. It's one of my big frustrations. We did actually make really good use of Google's G Suite, actually, which isn't that expensive, but gives you a lot of interesting ways to collaborate. We used a Drive to share all kinds of documents, and then, email addresses for everybody, a shared calendar, things like that, that really helped to get things around. But for the volunteers, that got a lot harder. The thing that helped the most, actually, for coordinating people was, oddly, Discord. A lot of campaigns have used Slack, but Discord does all the same things Slack does, but also has audio and video capabilities. And we found that a lot more people, especially younger people, already had it installed. So it turned out to be a really handy way for the core team to constantly toss things around and interact with each other. And then to have an extra layer on top of that, where just the volunteers, so they're sort of separated from like the core team part, but all the volunteers could coordinate things, or you could place volunteer opportunities if you want to help out on this day, and you just a nice way to announce things, and that helped a lot. But yeah, better tools for all of this stuff, really, I mean, it's essential, and there's just not enough there.
Yeah, piggybacking on what Liam just shared, Discord is, I didn't know what that was until recently, because Kenneth Mejia, who's running for city controller in LA right now, and he was actually my inspiration for running for Congress, because he ran for the same position right before. But they are using Discord right now, and I'm in the Discord chat. Holy crap, it is pretty cool. Like, I didn't know it was that fun. It's fun to be in Discord. I was like, this would have been great to have it for our campaign. But yeah, go check out Discord. It's so fun. You can like listen to music together with each other, and it's fun. But Discord's pretty dope. I think for platforms, yeah, I mean, for phone banking, we use ThroughTalk. Jess is an expert at it. So is Christina, and everyone that helped. You guys are experts at it. For text banking, Travis Klein and Kwa helped us out a lot. And obviously Abby, who's on here as well. But on the tech setup part, they're called, I think Kwa just shared, their name of their group is Go Forward. So you'll hear more about them later, but they haven't officially launched or anything. But their focus is on kind of tech support for progressive campaigns. And given that they ran our text banking platform for cents, like we were able to do something for so cheap. connecting that with a Google account, then with Spoke. And so that worked out well in our favor. Qua handled our email system as well. We did that with AWS, and that we did that for much cheaper than MailChimp. And so I think if you actually do find some tech savvy people to help you, you can save the dollars in that by a lot. And then mailers we did ourselves too. GPS, P&M, and all of our volunteers. I don't know if I'd ever do mailers again though, to be honest, because that was way too much work. But yeah, I would definitely hire a mailing company to do all of that. Because yeah, I don't think that anybody should be doing that, to be honest. So really, I think grassroots campaigns should really find creative ways to fundraise. I know that for LA grassroots organizations, what they do are these winter ball or fundraiser nights where they have comedians and local activists who are very talented in the arts and the entertainment industry, donating their talents for social justice and fundraiser needs. So tap into that, create those synergies, create creative ways to fundraise, so you don't have to do all of the legwork that we had to do for some of that. Yeah, if there are any other kind of things that come up, and if you are running for office, I know that I recently connected with Ali Dalzimer. She's running for Congress in Virginia. Humanity Forward, maybe check her out. But yeah, if you have any questions just like her, feel free to reach out in terms of campaign software or data or those types of needs, and I can answer the best that I can.
If I can add to some of those points, one of the exciting things is how quickly we're seeing the ecosystem around this change. Going into this general election, the software that existed, whether it was for progressives or any other group, was not equipped for the level of uses, the flexibility, the requirements that people had. And there was a very good grassroots patchwork approach to piecing all of this together, in the way that people found creative solutions like Discord or Slack. It was truly inspiring, but the thing that's the most exciting is that there are tons of groups right now that are all dedicated, focused on rebuilding platforms and tooling them towards campaigning in the 21st century. And the shifts that we're going to see in the coming months and years are nothing but exciting, to say the least. One thing that I also want to throw in is when it comes to engaging volunteers and recruiting new volunteers and also finding a manager, the best thing that you can do is start with that low-hanging fruit. So if you've got a volunteer that's come in, the best recruiting tool that you have is to look that volunteer in the eye and say, thank you so much for signing up. Can you go bring 2 or 3 of your friends? It's as simple as that. It grows organically, and then it gives you, again, the freedom to go to community colleges or to high schools and engage people there and do direct recruitment. And when it comes to management, honestly, I think this is an exciting opportunity to have a YangGang management training course. That's the type of thing that you can do. We have so many candidates and their managers that have learned a lot from working on the ground in the past few months. And we can pull together those resources, pull together that knowledge, and actually train people to not be candidates themselves, but be managers. And that right there is a grassroots focused approach to having affordable, passionate managers that are there and ready to make a difference. So there are so many new ways. We're seeing the shifts happen in real time, and I couldn't be more excited.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, it's pretty great how creative people can get. All right, so last question. How did you frame UBI when discussing it in your campaign? What was effective and not so effective in describing it? Liam, if you want to start.
That's an interesting one. I think in many ways it already is pretty well primed as an issue that can pull from both left and right. And that has something to do with its origins. So one thing that I actually used with a number of, it depends on who you're talking to, but with a number of people out in my area, because I'm in a red district, I actually used some of the right-wing rationales that came out in the 50s, 60s, 70s when people were talking about it. So I drew from them in order to lay out a rationale for it. And then talking to progressive groups, I just framed it a little bit differently, because you can actually address it in both ways. One of the keys for us, though, in this area too, and I think that might help just in general, is something that obviously Andrew started with, talking about automation, which is one of the reasons that I got interested in basic income a long time ago, because with the rise of artificial intelligence, robotics, and eventually biotech and whatnot, there's tons of jobs that are going to disappear and not be able to be replaced. And we haven't had that in previous revolutions. We've always been able to push into new areas and still find full employment for everyone. But we are going to get to a kind of, Jetsons, Star Trek sort of future where we don't have to labor for things, where I can just turn to the replicator and there's rather than employing people to do stuff. So what are we all supposed to do? Just starve to death? One of the keys there, actually, I was able to, and this probably has something to do with what I do for a living, but I tried to make the point about how higher wages helped us in the first place. Making that whole like Fordism argument that if you pay people enough that they can buy your crap, you'll sell more crap. All right. And then just tell people, look, wages are falling, jobs are disappearing. Half the jobs in America are going to disappear in the next couple of decades. So what happens when people can't afford to buy your crap anymore? Right now, we've been skating on debt, which is one of the reasons that consumer debt is at crisis levels right now. We've just barely been able to hold on to some elements of our standard of living because of debt, but living standards are already falling even with it. And it's completely unsustainable. So I tended to point back to that and show them that in a consumer economy, if people don't have money, the whole house of cards collapses. And this is one way to turn that back around and grow the economy for everyone. That helped a lot actually in our area too, especially given we have so many like logistics and warehousing jobs. I mean, those are eventually going to be like, all robots and one dude to feed the dog that keeps the rats out. I mean, there's no future there, right? And if that's all we've got, where are we going to go? So.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Liam. I think for me, it definitely evolved at a time when I filed to run in July 2019. I don't know if it's a believe it or not, but a lot of people weren't aware of what UBI was, or they were just learning about it through the presidential debates. And so I know that a lot of just different communities here weren't automatically embracive of UBI. And so there was a lot of explaining that I had to do in the beginning that I felt that I didn't have to do in the general cycle. Just kind of for the obvious reasons stated, with the pandemic happening, people not being able to have money to pay for rent or food, and talking about a stimulus check, cash relief. And so definitely the conversation completely changed around. During the primary cycle, I think the misunderstanding that probably some members of the community had were, oh, is David saying that UBI is the answer to everything? And I wasn't saying that, but I could see that how it was represented in that manner. For me, it was no, UBI is it's a game changer for sure, but there's also other ways integratively that we need to do as leaders who are elected to office in healthcare and other means and areas. And so, but I think for us, we were just highlighting it to make us stand out from the other progressive candidates that we had to beat out for the primary. And so that's why we just highlighted that perhaps more than others. But then during the general cycle, our community quickly realized and recognized, oh, actually, no, they're about kind of the other same issues that we're really passionate for. And as we can see how powerful a UBI would be, we even ourselves underestimated how powerful that could be. And I think it's just being mindful of what are the different experiences that each of our communities have. When we're talking about UBI, are we talking about it in the sense of isn't that cash that goes straight to the landlords? And there's that rabbit hole you can go down towards, but being mindful of these policies and discussions that you have in mind of, okay, yeah, that is one thing. So how do we work around these issues where people aren't even able to pay for rent? Like, how do we go about doing a rent and mortgage cancellation with an implementation of cash relief, or whatever means you have? I think that was just a bigger discussion to be had and to be focused on. But I think for what was good to see was, I think a lot of the candidates just locally as well have been talking about UBIs, and not just those Humanity Forward endorsed candidates. And so I think we've increased that conversation where even Angelica Dueñas, who I'm really good friends with, CA29, she's not necessarily a YangGang candidate per se. Like, she didn't start off with YangGang or Humanity Forward. She would be more a Bernie Red Rose progressive candidate, and just seeing different candidates. And I love to see how that, I don't know, I just felt like there was this marriage that happened between the Red Rose, Blue Hats, and just like when you see candidates like Jen Perelman or myself or Liam, just being able to really bring the community together and really and share how with that UBI is important, and we need to also make that one of our progressive issues that are commonly talked about, just as Medicare for All is talked about, UBI needs to be talked about. So I love how that all sort of played out in the end.
Thank you.
The way that we covered it was pretty straightforward. So my dad had grown up, or my dad had actually run a small 6-bay auto repair shop in the foothills of Appalachia. That's where I grew up and how I grew up. And the way that the busiest day of the year and busiest season we would have was tax refund season. It's when people got money from the government and they said, this is my chance, I'm going to go invest it in my car. And that was every single year the most dependable thing, because when people got money that they were not really expecting, they saw it as a chance to better themselves or go do those things that they weren't planning on doing beforehand. And being able to say, imagine that experience, but every single month, dependably, unconditionally, imagine the conversations that you can look to your neighbor and say, hey, what are you going to spend your UBI on this month? How are you going to invest it? What are you going to do? Are you going to tackle this challenge? Are you going to try this new thing? How are you going to move yourself forward because of this UBI? And being able to frame it that way and tell people, we are already seeing similar types of economic stimuli. We just have to remember that this is completely feasible, and it is up to us, the people, the voters, to make it happen. There is nothing stopping us from making this a reality. And when you put a UBI in those types of positive terms, it just rings true regardless of what side of the aisle you're on or what your background is or where you live in the country. People just get excited because they start to dream and they start to hope, and that's the whole idea.
I'm going to be brief here because I know we're over time, I think. Everything that we talk about in regards to UBI is visionary. We're creating a new way for Americans to think about their future. UBI gives us a chance to think of what can be. My favorite website was Every Single Month during the campaign. I don't know if you guys remember that, but I used to send people to that all the time that maybe couldn't understand the change that could come from it. So we are on the right path. We are the right path. Our Humanity First values and the things that we're promoting to the American people are innovative, they're new, they're refreshing, they're needed. We're suffering so badly right now with evictions. I mean, the reckoning we're going through on race relations, police brutality, environmental, pandemic. I mean, and we have a solution for it all in one thing. And I I hate to make it sound so grandiose, because I always feel like, am I just like drinking the Kool-Aid? But no, it's the truth. So anyway, I'm so appreciative of this event, and thank you for the California YangGang for putting it on. Really do enjoy this conversation. And in retrospect, I think we did a phenomenal job, considering, you know, the campaign suspended and we were thrown right into endorsing folks and getting them elected. I think we did a phenomenal job. And yes, there's improvement that can be done, but the spirit of passion for what we're doing is what got us through it. So thank you.
Yes, very much so, agreed. I'm going to pass it back to Jess.
All right, well, thank you so much, Dree, for handling that Q&A. That was fantastic. And thank you to all of our speakers tonight. This was extremely valuable and educational. And I just want to, you know, really say congratulations on all your hard work and accomplishments. I'm so proud of every single one of you, and can't wait to see what the future holds. So thank you so much. And thank you to everyone for coming. We will see you back in this fight tomorrow. Have a good night, everyone.